Good evening, good evening. Welcome. And today we are going to be talking about how to get funding for student accommodation, Airbnb, and township rentals. Ooh. I am trusting that you're doing well wherever you are watching us from. And like it is always, we are here. And at the top of the hour, I come out to you, and we are going. The topic today that we are going to be covering is how to get funding for student accommodation, Airbnb, township rentals, and we're gonna smash that all the way to the top of 7:30. My name is TJ, and I am always here on a Wednesday night, and I come out to you live. Yes, and you can ask questions as we go along. And this is the TJ tribe. So I always call that this is a family meeting. And the reason why I call this a family meeting is that we are discussing things that pertain the family. If you're married, your wife needs to be here. If you are the wife, your husband needs to be here. All right, and so that we can discuss these things that are important to the family. Today, we are starting off, we're going to be talking about funding, which is a pain for many people. They don't know how to get it right. So, if you can hear me in the chat, give me some thumbs up, or just tell me that my sound is good. You can hear me loud and clear, and I can see here the people that have already joined in. Thank you for joining us on a Wednesday evening. A lot of people are actually traveling today. I got lots of messages, people saying, TJ, we are traveling. Can you push it out to 8 o'clock? And I said, no. The church starts at 7 o'clock and we end at 7:30. If you are not here, you are going to watch the replay. So for for those family members that are going to watch this after, yes, we were thinking about you whilst we was here. So give me some thumbs up if you can hear me there. We are going to be talking about how to get funding. So this is about funding today. So how to get funding for student accommodation, how to get Airbnb, how to get in the township rental. I didn't just come up with this topic, by the way. Actually, there was a couple of people that asked me a question, that asked me several questions. So today, I'm going to do the conversation or the engagement with you slightly different. And when I'm saying slightly different is because normally I would come up with a presentation, and within that we can dive into a presentation. But today it's not really about teaching. I'm not teaching actually today. I'm going to be answering questions. And out of those questions, it's all talking about how to get funding for student accommodation, how to get funding for Airbnb, and someone asked the question how to get funding for township rentals. But I am going to be giving you exactly the questions that these people are asked. And within that, we are going to answer those questions. And by the way, if you know of anything better than what I'm going to be talking about, you can add it in the comments. So without wasting any time, I am going to start. Question number one, I am going to be answering around about 5 questions, I think, by the end of the day. So 5 questions that I'm going to be answering, and I'll give some context of this, and then thereafter I can reply. So this is Zinzile Mata, not Mata, Zinzile Mabena. Yeah, Zinzile Mabena, she asked the question, if you rent out a property and no clients come, you might have to pay for the property even though you might not stay there, right? So Zinzile is asking this question here. And basically, this question comes from Zinzile, and Zinzile is asking this question from a perspective of, I remember when she actually asked for this video, when she asked for the questions, rather. So basically, Zinzile, what she did is she was watching one of the videos that I did on Airbnb, how to do a rent to rent on an Airbnb. And then she asked the question, and basically you can see the question there right in the stroller here, that it is saying there, if you rent out a property and you get no clients. So the context is she was watching an Airbnb video, and I was talking about you don't have to own a property for you to do Airbnb. So sometimes you can go out and you can actually rent a property and you can then make it Airbnb. And then Zinzile asked this question. That's the context of it. Does it make sense? Cool. If it does make sense, so then the risk, she's talking about a risk here. Zinzile is talking about a risk. And the risk here is that now you've gone to rent a property, but now you have no tenants that are coming in. What do you do? Right? What do you do? So I want to start off by saying that it's okay for you to rent out a property and then you Airbnb. It's okay. However, you also need to make sure that wherever that you are renting from, so let's assume that you are in Johannesburg. If you are going to rent out a property in Soweto, is there a market for Airbnb? If you are going to be in Durban, in Kloof, is there a rental market for Airbnb? So you want to rent out, the first thing is you want to rent out your property in an area where people will be, where there's a demand for Airbnb, where people will come out and then they would say, I want to Airbnb a place. What are some of those places? It could be places of interest, right? I'm not saying holiday destination places. I said places of interest, right? It might be, yes, holiday destinations, but there has to be an interest. Why are people coming through to that area? If there is a reason, then definitely people will be able to come and then consider to come on Airbnb. But Airbnb is not the only platform. There's many other platforms. There's Laka Slap, love their adverts to death. I like the ones where the twins or the several kids, and then a couple of men mentioned their kids are Bella. I like that one. It killed me. Don't know if you guys have watched that one. But what if you do not, you now have this property and now no tenants? Remember, I said there has to be an interest. If there is no interest, then maybe you want to market the place. You want to market the place. How are you going to market the place? There are so many ways in which you can market a place, right? So Airbnb does that for you, but you also, as the owner of this place, not owner as in the title deed, but now the rented owner, right? You also must now go out there and market your property. So yes, it is correct, Zinzile's question. Yes, it's correct that you potentially may not have tenants. And the risk that you have is that obviously now you now need to pay out of pocket. So how best can you guard against that? Well, the first one is that when you are renting out a property, I normally say to people, make sure that you rent a property that you can afford with or without the Airbnb. Maybe you have around about 3 months of rent that you already have. Because remember, you're starting off a business, right? So make sure maybe you've got a savings of 3 months or even 6 months and see how it's going to work out. But do the best that you can to make sure that you have tenants that are going to come in. Word of mouth. Yes, Airbnb is going to promote for you, but you need also to promote actively in other ways, but driving traffic onto the Airbnb if you are super worried. The other question here that I hope that makes sense. If that makes sense, let me know in the chat. Or if you do have any other suggested question that you would want to actually suggested answers that you would like to give to Zinzile, go for it in the chat, in the comments. Give her some comments. We are here, we are a family. The tribe is here. We are here to help one another. And by the way, you are also welcome to ask a question, right? You are also welcomed to ask a question. I'm going to jump into question number 2. Question number 2, this comes again from Zinzile. It was a follow-up question. Zinzile, thanks a lot for asking all of these questions. And the question here, she is saying, can you please give tips and things to look for when looking to rent a property? So again, it was on the same video. And if possible, all the legal issues one might encounter in order one might encounter in doing this. This is Airbnb, right? Okay, so I think I've covered the first bit in my previous comments. Maybe let's jump on to talk about the possible, if possible, all the legal issues. Woo! Right. Can I do all possible here? Well, I don't think I might be able to do all possible, but maybe let me try. Right? Let me see what I can do. Not all possible, but let's cover some of them. Right? High five. Good. Go ahead. Right. So remember, you are renting a property from someone else. So there is John, and John is renting the property, right? And John has rented the property from Susan, okay? So let's work with those two people. Susan is the landlord, and John has rented this property from Susan. And now John is going to Airbnb the place. Number one, I'm going to give you a couple of things here. So number one, John is renting this property from Susan. There has to be a contract between the two of them. And John needs to also alert Susan that he intends not to stay in the property, but he also intends to rent it out. So he's further renting it out. I've seen a lot of people that go in and rent properties and they do not tell their landlords that they are going to rent the property on. So you need to disclose that. Once you have disclosed that, they may object to it. If they object to it, it's fine. It's their property. They wouldn't like to have other people that is unknown to them. Let us assume that this property is, let's say, in a gated area, like in a complex, an estate. Some estates or complexes do not allow for Airbnb. So the other legal aspect here that one now needs to look into is that the landlord, Susan, needs to make sure that the property can be rented out as Airbnb and it will be permitted. So it's not like it's not permitted. Remember, in a gated area, we all make the rules and then we all agree. So which basically means that if all of us agree, that's the rule. But what if one or two people are like, nah, well, all of us, we have agreed. That's why we go and stay in gated areas. The majority rules. So in this instance, you may go into the body corporate or whatever scheme that you may have, and they may say no. If they say yes, there may be also a yes with parameters. So I have seen in some other areas, they may say yes, but their yes might be, they would want to see long-term tenants, which means that, yes, you can still do Airbnb, but they're looking for tenants not that are going to come in and rent out for an hour or maybe 2 hours, right? We know what they're doing, eh? Yeah. They are refreshing. Yes, they're just refreshing themselves. Yes, right. Now, having said that, long-term could be a month, could be 3 months. So from a legal perspective, before you jump into this contract, have a magnifying glass to double check to see what does the contract say. Is what I'm trying to do permitted? If it is allowed, then you're good to go. Yeah. Over and above that, Airbnb itself has its own terms and conditions, which will cover things like insurance, which will cover things like how do you operate within the Airbnb parameters. So familiarize yourself with that because it also falls within part of your legal, right, to understand that. Now, I don't train Airbnb. A friend of mine called Karen Fraser, she does that. And she's been my teacher in Airbnb. So if you're interested in the Airbnb space, she is the person to go out to. I've seen quite a few other people as well that are doing that. The next question that I'm going to be answering here, does this make sense? And let me jump on to the comments. A couple of people are still greeting. Awesome stuff. Awesome stuff. Let's go ahead. Right. So I'm going to go ahead. Christian Affirmations 5639. Can you please talk about how to get funding for student accommodation. Student accommodation. This is what Christian Affirmations says. By the way, Christian Affirmations, welcome and thanks a lot for tuning in. It's great having you and asking the questions. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're also looking for questions, you've got some questions that you're wanting to ask in the comments, ask those questions, and yours truly, TJ, will be able to answer those questions for you. Obviously, we don't do it every week because some weeks we do other things other than answering questions. Right. So this week we are dedicating it to answering questions. All right, let's go ahead. Can you please talk about funding for student accommodation? All right. I'm going to assume that Christian is a newbie in the game, right? He knows nothing about student accommodation and he knows nothing about coming into getting funding. So the first one, Christian, is that you can approach any bank for a home loan, right? And depending on the area that you're going to be doing students and depending on how many you're going to be doing students, then you need to disclose to your bank that this is the type of tenants that you're going to be having. Now, let's come back a couple of steps backwards. Right. So let's assume you're in Polokwane and you are asking the bank to give you finance for student accommodation. What does the bylaws in your area say? Is it maybe 10 unrelated people can stay in a normal home, right? And if you're only going to have, let's say, 5, that might easily be in a normal home loan. The banks will fund that. You only have like 5 people staying on that property. So that's a normal rental property. Okay. The other one that you can also do is that within the banks themselves, once you have gone above home loans, there is what they call commercial lending. Commercial lending works very different from how home loans. So home loans is basically we normally get like a 20 to 30 year bond on your property, and then you just pay on a monthly basis. Commercial loans, you get them on 10 years, 15 years. I've never really seen like a 20-year loan on a commercial. The best I've seen is like 15 years, right? Now, if it is 15 years, obviously now it means that your repayment is slightly higher because now you are paying, over a shorter period. I've also seen there's other boutique banks. They fund maybe for 5 years. I've seen a bank that does 5 years. I've also seen another bank that does 7 years. I've spoken about 10 years. So how do you get the funding now? So the first one is that we have just spoken about entry level. A normal bond, you need to qualify for a bond. What if you can't qualify for a bond? Maybe get someone else, partner with someone else who qualifies. And then you can go out and you can buy the property, a normal property, maybe a 3-bed or 5-bed. And now you can then rent it out, depending on your bylaws for the area, for the number of people that you can do. Now, student accommodation could also be regarded as commercial. And depending on the municipality that you are in, they may also ask you to change the land use of the property to accommodate boarding, right? To accommodate boarding, because student accommodation is seen as boarding. So once you change that, the land use, you obviously now, if you have taken the loan with a normal bank as a normal home loan, you now need to notify them because the land use has changed. So your terms and condition might change into commercial. The other one is that, remember, this is, please talk about how to get funding. So we've just spoken about one thing on how to get funding. So now we're jumping in onto the second part of it, how to get funding. Maybe you can club with other people. When you club with other people, that one pays 100, that one pays 200, that one is 300. All of a sudden, you're now on 600,000 and you go out, you buy a property. You can even start at Stokvel. If you know how to manage it, if you know how to run it, that's also possible. That's funding. Or I've also seen people that will write a business case and they will approach some of the universities and then they'll go to a specialized bank like Investec. or any of these other boutique banks, and they will approach them with their business plan to say they are going to have 1,000 bed, and with that they would like a financing partner, and you can get a financing partner like that. So a bit of groundwork, a bit of due diligence, supporting documentation, approaching or knocking on several doors for you to get the right funding. The commercial banks that we all know of, which is like the big four, ABSA, FMB, Standard, Nedbank, they're not the end and be all. There's so many banks out there. I think there's about 63, if I'm not mistaken. So knock on any of those doors for the funding itself. All right. I hope that makes sense. Thank you very much, Christian Affirmation. Let's go to the next person. The next question that comes through from Talita. Talita says, hi, I would like to ask, how do I get funding to build my own rentals in the township? Right. This question here, I specifically chose these two questions together because I do think that maybe in our minds, when we are looking at some of these funding mechanisms, we get stuck in the land use or where we are. So land use, student accommodation, township is also a land use. By the way, all neighborhoods are called townships. But what what Talita is mentioning here, she is actually mentioning specifically for in the high density areas, right? That's what we regard as township, but all neighborhoods, they're called townships, right? From a town planning perspective. So it doesn't matter where you are, right? What matters is that all the banks, they fund all neighborhoods. If they are not funding a particular area, it basically means that there is a problem with that area. So you could be doing student accommodation in the township, or you could be doing normal property rentals in the townships. So it doesn't matter what property you have. Banks will fund those areas, right? So that's your option number one. The normal banks, they will fund you. But let's assume you are wanting to do something a little bit different. I have seen there is several other, I want to say, boutique banks again. And when I'm talking about boutiques banks here, I'm talking about the banks that are in existence that will lend you money, but they are not the big ones, the commercial ones. They might be like literally a bank that is like they only have a head office, and that's the only place that they are at. You know, they're not anywhere else. Of late, there's a bank that has been funding a lot in the townships. They're called Uma Stand, and they are backed by TAF, and they've been going all over the country now supporting the townships. But it doesn't mean that they're the only ones. Like I mentioned, there's around about 63 of these banks that you can approach, and some of them they don't have like a big footprint like some of these big banks are. So do your research around banks in South Africa, lenders. Let's just say lenders in South Africa. There's many of them, and for as long as you can provide a solid business case to say, if I am to put out a property here, I can collect rent this much, and I am building it so much, so I'm going to making a profit. The banks will be happier to fund you, or the lenders will be able to lend you, because there's so many lenders out there. I hope I've able to answer your questions there, Talita. And let me go on to the next question. Maybe let me jump into the comments if there is any other comments from anyone else. And by the way, ladies and gentlemen, you are allowed to ask questions, yeah, as I go along, or even as you go along. Emily, you ask a question, what is the criteria for Airbnb? I don't really understand that question, but let me maybe try to understand it a little bit. The criteria of Airbnb is that, remember, you're putting your property on a platform, right? So it's a platform, and many people will go onto the platform if they are wanting to look for short-term rentals, predominantly short-term rentals, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you can only do short rentals. You can do long-term as well. like you can only accept people for 3 months or 6 months on your property. So the criteria here is your property needs to be accessible. Obviously, you need to have access to your property. That's number one. And then number two, you also need to make sure that you have a place where you are going to give these people. So do you have a room? Are you wanting to rent out the entire property, your property that you've got? Over and above that, what other services can you give? Are you going to cook for them? Are you going to wash for them? Are you going to drive them around? And all of those other activities or services that you are talking about, you could also bill for them. So let's assume I was coming to your house. I'm a young bachelor. I'm coming through to your place, and you then say to me via Airbnb, you can stay at my property 500 Rand a night or a day. And for that, I will wash, and laundry is included and food is included, which basically means that every day I'll be expecting the food from you. And basically, that's the criteria. You load your property onto Airbnb, and bingo, you start making money. So thanks a lot for asking that question, Emily. Right. Who else? No more questions there. I am going to jump on to my last question. I think this is my last question. Remember, we are here from 7 o'clock all the way to the 7:30, right? So we are slowly getting to our 7:30 halfway mark. This is, I'm just going to call this person Imogen, I think. Imo is asking the question, I always check properties on Property 24, private property, and big up to private property. They had a private networking session yesterday. I was there with many of other industry leaders in the property space, and it was good networking to some of you guys if you were there. Guys like Ibo, Eku, Andrew, Witness, Daka, Dr. Slee, all of you guys. It was great really seeing you there. Ezra, Ezra, when I grow up, I want to be like you, brother. But nonetheless, let's answer the question here. The question here is, I'm always checking, I am always checking, I always check properties on Property 24, private property and others, but I have never seen a block of flats being advertised. Is that true? Which platform can I see flats for sale? So this person here is looking for a block of flats. Block of flats. So allow me to go through what I'm going to do here. I am going to share screen, and I am going to go to private property. Yes. Maybe I should have gone to private property, isn't it? Yeah. Okay, let me go there. Right, sharing my screen. It's coming up. Right, there you go. Right. So as you can see, I am looking at that particular property there, right? And let's just go and see. Let me pull up a different screen so that you guys can see. All right, great, you can see there. Right, so this person has said they cannot see where they would find a block of flats. Right, so we're gonna say sell, and brother, Imo, you go to property 24. I was going to say to private property 24, and let's put in Johannesburg in here. Johannesburg. So for sale, then you put in the area. And this time around, in here, you choose commercial, right? And when you choose commercial, let's leave this blank. Let's leave that blank, and we hit search. So remember, we are looking for blocks of flats, right? Let's select from maybe high to low. There is around about 592 properties. 450 million. So it's a big complex of sort. There's also a big this is in central Johannesburg, 173. This is a block of flats. right? Used to be the National Bank House. This is for sale. They're selling it. There's another one there. There's another block of flats. There's another block of flats. There's another block of flats. Right. Let's go and look for maybe maximum price of, let's say, 2 million. Is there a block of flats in Johannesburg less than for 2 million? There is. Oh, Rosettenville, Fairview. So sort of like a block of flats, sort of, Commissioner. This one, Bellevue, right? So you need to be looking for places. There's a block of flats in Kenilworth, right? There you go. Block of flats. Block of flats for sale. There it is, my friend. Right. Perfect investment with business rights. This block of flats. Business rights. Bim, bam, 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 bam. Okay. I hope I've been able to help. Who was asking that question again? Let's see. Emo. It is Emo. Let's see. Yep, it is you. There, my friend, I've been able to show you how best you can go. That was just on property 24. I've been able to look for block of flats for you. And I'm hoping that you can use the same skill to go through and find your block of flats. Right. It is 7:32. I apologize for the time. Right. Let's see. Andile is asking the questions. Are the cottages allowed in townships, or I have to consult town planner? Good question and good answering yourself. Yes, cottages are allowed. You are allowed to have a cottage by standard. You're allowed to have cottages. I think it's about one, right? It depends with the area. So there is guidelines that you can easily ask at the town, not at the town council, but at the council. Yes, at the council. They've got a town planning office. You can easily ask them to say, this is my piece of land in this area, and they'll give you a guidelines, and you'll be able to see what you can be able to put on your property and how many. If you're, let's say, it might say one dwelling and maybe two dwellings, right? Two dwellings could mean your primary dwelling, which is your first property, and then the second one would be this cottage that we're talking about. Then they will give you guidelines in terms of what is the size of the parameters, right? The sizes of that. They'll give you parameters of that. And then thereafter, you can speak to your architect, and then the architect can be able to draw that for you. However, I do urge you, yes, speak to a town planner. Town planner is a good person to start that cause. Awesome stuff. Let us ask. Right. Green Creek says, evening. I have an innovative way of capitalizing on Airbnb. Been doing research over 5 months now. How do I go about finding an investor for my idea? Well, you've already started here, my friend. Investors are everywhere. I think we complicate things and think that investors are, out there. Sometimes investors are right there in our families. So put your proposal together, maybe 1 page, 2 page. Start asking people in your family to say, look, I need help with this. And already maybe someone in the family can be able to already give you some ideas, or they might have some money. Or if you really, really, really are stuck, reach out to us at in the description. You'll be able to see where how you can connect with us, and we'll be able to give you some golden nuggets. Douglas is saying thanks for the golden nuggets tonight, Uncle. Yes, sir. Okay, awesome stuff. It's been great hanging out with you guys. Enjoy your holidays, your long holidays. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't subscribed, and the notification buttons, so that next week when I go live again, you are notified and you are here. It's been great hanging out with you. Cheers and God bless.